This video isn't a scare story, and it isn't a game of pretending at history. It's an attempt for a few minutes to show what life felt like for a person who was turned into property. We built this POV story from real testimonies, from Frederick Douglass's recollections, where he wrote that enslaved people sing most when they are most unhappy, from Solomon Northup's accounts of markets and the buying and selling of human beings, from the story of Harriet Jacobs, who hid for years in a tiny attic to survive, and from interviews with formerly enslaved people recorded by the Federal Writers Project. In a moment, you'll wake up in a cabin in the quarters, step into the field before sunrise, learn what a quota is, what weighing means, and why evening can be more terrifying than the whip. You'll see how people were sold, how families were torn apart, how love tried to exist by permission, and how the dream of escape smells like swamp water, dogs, and the law of 1850. POV. You're an enslaved person on a cotton plantation. U.S., the 1850s. You wake up not because you're rested. You wake up because in the dark, the air already whistles, short, sharp, and through it comes a heavy sound, a horn, a bugle. It doesn't call, it commands. Inside the cabin, it reeks of smoke, wet clay, and human sweat. The night still hangs on, but here it isn't for sleep. It's just the pause between one stretch of work and the next. You're lying on the floor on a rough pallet. No one calls it a bed. Adults sometimes have a blanket, one for two, and that's considered normal. Beside you, your people stir. Your wife, a boy, an old aunt. They breathe softly, as if even breathing could bring trouble. The cabin is small, logs, gaps, a low ceiling. The windows have no glass. If you're lucky, there's a wooden shutter. The floor is often just packed dirt. The fireplace is the only place that's warm, and the only place you can boil anything at all. You sit up and feel it right away. The skin on your palms is thinner than paper, split with cracks. Under your nails is yesterday's dried dirt. You scrape at it, and it's almost funny that you bother. In an hour, it'll be part of you again. Outside, you can hear someone coughing, like cough is the only thing they still do by their own will. Morning. Food that keeps you on your feet. You step out. The air is cold and damp. Fog hugs the ground. In the distance stands the owner's big house, white, calm, as if it doesn't belong to this world at all. Closer are the quarters, the row of cabins where you live, like a small village, only without the right to be a village. Breakfast is cornmeal mush or a little cake, sometimes a piece of salted pork or fish. The ration, about 8 pounds of meat a month and a bushel of cornmeal, at least that's how the ones who survived it later described it. The water is warm, like other mouths have already been in it. You swallow fast, not out of greed, but out of fear you won't have time. Clothes are rough, scratchy, so it won't be a shame to ruin them. For the whole year, a few simple things, cheap, sewn badly. The funny part is something else. Sometimes you catch yourself thinking, save the shirt. And then you realize you're not trying to save the shirt. You're trying to save the feeling that you're still a person who owns something. In the field, work starts before the sun. They line you up. Some go with one gang, some with another. On cotton, everyone works who can stand. There's a driver. Sometimes he's black too, but they gave him power so he'd keep the rest of you afraid. There's an overseer on horseback, and the whip is like an extension of his arm. You take the sack that will drag at your shoulders all day. Cotton is soft, just not for fingers. It snags, tears skin, leaves invisible splinters. The white bowls look innocent until you understand that inside each one is someone's back, someone's tears, someone's years. The work moves in a line. You bend, pull the cotton, throw it into the sack, bend again and again. You try to find a rhythm so you don't go mad. Rhythm is salvation. Songs, too. You remember the words of a man who later managed to write his own story. Enslaved people sing most often when things are worst. Song isn't about joy. It's about not suffocating from the inside. The quota, the number your skin depends on. The scariest thing isn't the whip. The scariest thing is evening. Because in the evening, there will be weighing, and you have a quota. You've heard different numbers. For children, pick this much. For adults, more. In former slaves' memories, it comes up that even children could be driven to pick 150 pounds of cotton a day, and if you don't make it, punishment waits. You know another rule, too. If you manage it, tomorrow the quota will be higher. That's how the system works. You did it, so you can do more. And this is where the dark humor shows up, the kind that keeps your head from breaking. One guy whispers, "If they raise my quota one more time tomorrow, I'm officially going to start thinking of myself as a mule." You snort, quick, almost invisible. Laughter is dangerous here, but without it, you would have gone hollow long ago. Sometimes people try to cheat the weight, hide something heavy in the sack, but it almost always ends the same. They search you, they catch you, and then the punishment becomes an example for everyone else. Fear is a tool too, like a hoe. Noon, 5 minutes that feel like a vacation. The field is hot. The air shimmers. Your back is wet. Your shirt sticks. At noon, they give you a little time. You sit in the shade, eat what you brought, corn, a bit of fatback, drink. Look at your fingers, red, bloody, like the cotton is eating you one piece at a time. Someone nearby tells a story, quietly, like a prayer, about a woman who could pick so much cotton that white people called it a miracle, while her shoulders were knotted from beatings. In interviews with former slaves, stories like that appear again and again. Speed, quota, punishment, as if life was measured in pounds. You listen and think, if I pick faster, will I be worth more? And then you understand, worth more doesn't mean safer. Evening, weighing and the smell of fear. The sun goes down, but work doesn't end when it's pretty. Work ends when they allow it. Some testimonies say they could drive you until dark, and sometimes longer, if it was needed. And then weighing, a bell or a shout. People line up, sacks come off, cotton is dumped out, counted. You stand there and feel your stomach turn cold. If you didn't make it, you can see it before it happens. The overseer isn't looking at you. He's looking at the number. The number decides whether you'll sleep tonight. You made it, barely, on the edge. And in that moment, instead of relief, you feel anger, because you know tomorrow the number will be bigger. Night. Life after work. You go back to the quarters, and a second shift begins, at home. Someone mends shoes, someone patches clothes, someone treats a wound with herbs because no one's taking you to a doctor just because. Someone has a tiny garden if the owner allows it. Saturday is often the only time you can work for yourself, plant, fix, survive. You step into the cabin. Your wife looks at your back and says nothing, because if she asks, "How are you?" you might not hold it together. You might answer with the truth. A child whispers, "Dad,
Did you come back earlier today? You smile. I was fast today. And it's almost funny, as if speed in the field could be a reason to feel proud. Then you hear someone in the next cabin quietly playing on a homemade instrument, something like a banjo, something like it. And you understand. Music is your way of proving to yourselves that you're still alive.
A memory that's always nearby, how you were bought. Sometimes the worst thing isn't happening now. Sometimes it lives in memory. You don't remember the field, you remember the market. First, there was a pen, a place where people are kept like goods. They made you wash, shave, put on clean clothes so you'd sell better. In Solomon Northup's recollections, it's described plainly. They clean you up like a horse before a sale. Then, the inspection. They make you open your mouth, show your teeth. They squeeze your shoulders, your biceps, like you're a sack of flour. You stand there, and inside, everything burns with a shame that isn't even yours. It's the world's shame. You saw them check a mother with children like that. You saw a buyer ask not, "What's her name?" but, "How old is she?" And then you saw the auction sort a family into different hands. In one text collected by the National Humanities Center for memories of people who lived through slavery, the moment is described so vividly you feel it on your skin. The crowd, the platform, the inspection of muscles and teeth, and the agony of separation, something you have to see to understand. You remember your mother's face when they took her sister away. You remember how she tried to hold herself together and couldn't. That was the first time you understood. Slavery isn't only work, it's the power to tear people apart. And you understood one more thing. If you're young, strong, fit for the field, you cost more. By 1850, prime field hands, top field workers, could be priced at enormous sums for the time. If you have a trade, carpenter, blacksmith, coachman, that's value too. You're not a person, you're an investment. Family. Love by permission and fear without warning. You have a wife, but the law doesn't call it a marriage. Your family exists because you decided to call yourselves a family, and because the owner isn't against it for now. The state doesn't protect your bond. You have no contract, no right, no guarantee. Historians and archivists say it plainly. Enslaved marriages had no legal force, and an owner could separate husband and wife, sell them, move them, forbid them to see each other. You married simply, witnesses, an old preacher if there was one, and sometimes an old custom, jumping the broom, not because it's folklore, but because you need a sign, we are together. After that, there was a small joy. Someone stole 2 apples, someone brought sweet molasses, someone tapped out a rhythm with spoons, and you remember how you laughed, briefly, as if someone might hear and cancel your laughter. But fear is always standing beside you. They can sell your child. Families were often broken by sales, because of the owner's deaths, because of a punishment, because of a good deal. You know women who give birth and cry not from pain, but from the thought, this child isn't mine. On paper, it's someone's property. Saturday and Sunday, a life that tries to be a life. Saturday is sometimes shorter, the field until noon, then gardens, repairs, your own things, and at night, if they allow it, a frolic, dancing, music. And here is Saturday evening. Someone brings out a fiddle. Sometimes you play too. It's your weakness and your secret strength. You once read a man who survived terrible years, writing that on plantations, the fiddle could be part of controlling people. Music could be joy and also a way to keep you calm. A banjo twangs, someone pounds a rhythm on a tin pan, someone does patting juba, slaps on the body, on palms, on knees, because drums were often banned, feared as tools of uprising. And then a real human funny moment appears. One guy dances like he has springs in his heels. Someone yells, "Hey, are you sure you're not from New Orleans?" He answers, "I'm from the place where the whip is faster than music." And everyone laughs because it's true and because otherwise you'd go mad. Then the laughter thins out because in the songs there isn't only rhythm, you can hear longing. Escape, a dream that smells like swamp, dogs, and the paper of 1850. People talk about escape in whispers, not because they don't want to speak loudly, because loud means death.
You know the trails into the woods. You know where the swamp is, where you can hide. You know the word patrollers, white night riders who catch you without a pass, check you, beat you. You know about the dogs, too. Not just dogs, but dogs trained to hunt a human being. It was part of the system of terror and capture. And you know about the new fear that came in 1850. Even if you make it to a free state, they can drag you back. The law required the return of fugitives and punished those who helped. You heard the story of a couple who escaped in plain sight. The wife disguised herself as a white planter, the husband as her servant, and they traveled by trains and steamboats. Ellen and William Craft. Their escape became a legend. And then, because of the 1850 law, they had to go farther still so they wouldn't be caught again. You hear that, and two thoughts rise in your chest at once. So it's possible, and so even possible doesn't last long. What it looks like when you decide. You choose a night with no moon. You take nothing extra. Anything is noise. Any noise is death. You say goodbye to the cabin with your eyes, not out loud. Out loud is forbidden. You go into the woods, feel branches snag your clothes. You try to walk through water so the dogs can't take your scent. You breathe into your sleeve as if breath were smoke. For 2 days you eat what you find, berries, roots. You hear barking in the distance, and your thought snaps off because a second dog answers, and then a third, and you can't tell what's louder now, the dogs or your heart. You freeze. The forest feels like it's listening with you. Far off, a branch creaks, and you're almost sure it isn't a branch, it's a boot. You move again, slowly, in water, ankle deep, then knee deep. It feels like water should wipe away a trail the way a rag wipes dirt off a table. That's what many did, and many believed they could fool the dogs. In former slave stories, dogs and patrollers surface again and again like a shadow you can't shake. Mosquitoes swarm like tiny overseers. You didn't get away from one, you get 10. And even here, in fear, a brief, stupid thought flashes. If mosquitoes could be weighed, they'd meet the quota better than people. You swallow a laugh and immediately cough. The sound jumps out like a traitor. You clamp your mouth with your sleeve. The barking draws closer. And then, light, not sunlight, torches. Between the trees, silhouettes flicker. Someone on horseback, someone on foot, and the dogs pull the leashes like the leash is the only thing keeping them from joy. You press yourself into the ground, your face in the mud, the smell of wet leaves like a soaked sack. You try to become a rock, a tree, a lump of earth. The dogs come nearer. You hear them snort, sniff, read the air greedily. One torch stops right beside you. You see a boot, a buckle, light on a pant leg. A stranger's voice says lazily, like this is a stroll, "Where are you, huh?" And you want to scream, "I'm here, I'm a human being," but you stay silent. The dog jerks and then turns away. You don't understand. Luck, water, wind, God, chance? The torches pass by.
You lie there a long time, a very long time, until it isn't your body that starts to ache, it's the thought itself. Two paths standing side by side. Escape always splits into two futures, and you can see both. The first future, if you make it, you go farther toward roads, toward people who don't ask, "Who do you belong to?" but whisper, "Faster." You hide in barns, under floors, in wagons, then a town, then the north, and even there you live as if a door behind you is always open for the ones who will come for you by law, because after September 18th, 1850, the date the law was signed, they could hunt you down and return you, and those who helped could be fined and jailed. The second future, if you don't, and it smells of rope, dust, and chujie hands, hands that aren't yours.
You know, most fugitives were caught. In testimonies, the same things repeat. Dogs, patrols, punishment as an example, and sometimes irons on the body, or being sold farther away to kill the urge to try again. You lie in the mud and understand both versions of the future are real, and both are terrifying. You go on, and they take you anyway. On the third day, hunger stops being a feeling and becomes a personality. It starts talking to you. You chew a root and think it tastes like wood. Then you realize, yes, it is wood. At night, you reach the edge of a field, not yours, someone else's. You hear a rooster far off. You see a weak glow, and you decide, risk it. You're out of water, out of strength. You creep toward a shed. You reach for a bucket, and at that moment, the door swings open. First, you hear a click, then a voice. Then someone grabs you so hard, like you're a sack of cotton they can't afford to drop. After that, everything happens fast and slow at the same time. They march you. The dogs bark. Someone laughs. Someone curses. You stare at the ground because if you lift your eyes, you'll see faces, and those faces will stay with you forever. Punishment isn't described beautifully. It's done so you remember. In former slaves' memories, there are words that make you go cold. After capture, they could beat someone until he barely lived, and then, so he wouldn't try again, they might set a dog on him or keep him under constant watch. They bring you back to the plantation. And the worst part isn't the pain. The worst part is the silence of your own. Your wife stands by the cabin and doesn't cry, because to cry is to let them take the last thing she still has, control of her face. A child hides behind her skirt and looks at you like you came back from war, only here, the war is every day. At night, you lie there, and it feels like the pain isn't in your back, it's in your name, as if they crossed you out and rewrote you, the one who tried. And then the owner does what you feared more than the whip. A week later, a wagon rolls into the yard. Not just a wagon, people in good coats, neat as if they came not for souls, but for horses. The trader speaks with the owner calmly. You catch a few words: stubborn, tried, sell, farther away. You understand. They're selling you. Downriver, downriver. It isn't just a direction, it's a sentence. In American history, this was called the domestic slave trade. People were moved in mass from the upper South into the cotton and sugar regions deeper in the South. They make you wash, clean up like the others. They measure you again with hands and eyes, teeth, shoulders, fingers, back. In descriptions of slave sales, this repeats. They sat people down, made them look presentable, inspected them like goods, hands, teeth, body. And then the worst movie with no music, goodbye.
Your wife holds the child. The child reaches a hand toward you. You want to say something strong, something real, but only this comes out. Listen to your mother. And it sounds so pitiful you want to hit yourself, but you can't because your hands are already tied with rope. The road down, chains, a steamboat, and a city that sells people. They take you with others. Sometimes it's called a coffle, a group of people chained and driven together. Descriptions of such columns survived in sources. Chains, ropes, people walking two abreast, and inside each one, a small private death. Then a steamboat. The river is huge, beautiful, like a picture, and that makes it worse. Nature isn't guilty, but it watches in silence. You see New Orleans. The city roars, smells of spices, fish, sweat, alcohol. People laugh, bargain, sing, and inside all that, a market where people are sold. They line you up again. They check you again. Someone buys a woman and asks if she can cook. Someone buys a man and asks if he's inclined to run.
And that's the moment you understand what value means in their world. Strength, age, no problems, obedience, skills. Love, family, memory aren't on the list. A new plantation, different climate, same lock. They sell you to Louisiana. Here the air is humid and heavy, like wet cloth over your face. Here the work might not only be cotton, it might be sugar, ditches, swamps. Here mosquitoes aren't a joke, they're part of the wage. The quarters look like the old ones, only worse, more damp, more insects, more heat. You learn to sleep in a way that doesn't end in scratching yourself bloody. On the first evening, an old man comes up to you and says, "Don't break. People break fast here." He tells stories like medicine. He whispers about a woman who hid so well they couldn't find her for years, in a tiny attic above relatives' home, only a few feet of space, and she lived there nearly 7 years, watching life through a small crack. That's the real story of Harriet Jacobs. She described her hiding place as a cramped attic, about 9 feet long, 7 wide, with the highest point around 3 feet. You listen, and you feel cramped even standing outdoors. Then the old man whispers about another person who mailed himself. At first you think it's a tall tale. Then you hear the details, a box lined with cloth, roughly 3 feet long, about 2 feet wide, the trip lasting nearly a day. And when they opened it, he politely said, "How do you do, gentlemen?" and sang a song of thanks. That's the story of Henry Box Brown. You can't help it. You smile for the first time in a long while, because there's something almost comic in it. A world where a person can be delivered like a parcel, and that's considered a miracle. Then the old man adds a third story about a couple who ran so boldly they traveled first class. The wife disguised herself as a white master. The husband played her servant, Ellen and William Craft. They really were stopped and suspected, but they made it through. And later, because pursuit tightened after the 1850 law, they had to go farther so they wouldn't be caught. You sit with your back against the cabin wall and understand. All these stories aren't fairy tales. They're proof that freedom exists, but it always costs too much. You start a family again, and it's like building a house on sand. Time passes. You're no longer new. You've become part of this plantation, like a tree that was transplanted and still has to grow. You meet a woman. Her name is May. She laughs like laughter is the only thing she truly owns. You marry the only way you can here, without papers, without law.
sometimes by custom, sometimes before God, sometimes with a jump over a broom, because you need some sign that you aren't just bodies inside one system. But you tell her the truth right away. You can separate us. She answers, then we'll love faster. It's funny and frightening at the same time, because faster is a word of slavery, but she takes it and makes it hers, like a weapon. You decide on a second attempt, not because you're brave, but because you can't stay. One evening, you hear the trader came again. They talked about debts again. They named people who might be sold again. And you understand, if you stay, they'll take not only your freedom, they'll take everything you still love. You don't tell May everything. You only say, if I disappear, remember, I didn't leave you. I left so that one day I could come back, if only as a word, a letter, a chance. You leave at night, and this time you're not a hero from a legend. You're just a person walking, because otherwise you'll die on the inside. You move carefully. You avoid roads. You hide by day. You listen. And at some point you meet someone, free black or a poor white man, you're not sure. He doesn't say much. He just looks at you and says, not that way, that way. Help like that was deadly dangerous after the fugitive slave law. For food or shelter, people could face serious punishment, and still, people helped.
And these become the strangest days of your life. For the first time, you're hiding not from work, but from the law. For the first time, you understand the law isn't truth. The law is paper that holds the whip. You reach the north, and freedom doesn't sound like a fanfare. You arrive in a city. Everything is different. People walk faster, talk louder, look differently. They give you a new name, or you choose it yourself. You try to get used to the fact that nobody screams at you every morning. But then a cold thought arrives. 1850 made the hunt longer. Even here you can be prey for the men who come with papers and a marshal. You sleep against a wall like in a cabin, out of habit, so you can hear the door. You flinch at footsteps on the stairs. You don't trust silence. Silence feels too much like an ambush. And still, sometimes you smile. Because one morning you wake up to a sound that changes everything. Not a horn, not a shout, just the ordinary noise of the street. People argue about the price of bread. Someone laughs, someone quarrels, and no one has the right to sell you to pay another man's debts. And you think, there it is, freedom, not as a celebration, as a simple thing, to wake up and not belong. Last scene, a letter that could happen, and you write it anyway. You find paper, ink, your hands shake. You write to May. You don't know if it'll reach her. You don't know if she's alive on that plantation. You don't know if they sold her. You don't know if you'll ever see the child who could have been free. You write anyway, because a letter is also an escape of a voice from a cage. And before you fold the sheet, you remember words from the stories you heard. People sang not from happiness, but from pain, because song helped them not to choke from the inside. Frederick Douglass wrote about exactly this. Singing was not proof of contentment, but a way to survive suffering. You don't sing, you write. And for a second, it feels like a thin thread appears between you and the past. Not a chain, but a thread. And that's different.